Welcome to The Gut Show. This is a space for the woman struggling with her gut or dealing with a digestive disorder like IBS. I'm your host, Erin Judge, registered dietitian and gut health expert. My mission is to cut the crap and have conversations about the reality of gut issues and solutions that work. So if you're ready to poop better, have more energy, and feel connected to a community that gets it, you're in the right place. Recording. Well, thank you guys for being back for another episode. I am pumped for this conversation because we have one of my good friends, Christine from MyIBSLife. So she created this incredible community on Instagram, TikTok, on her podcast, and on YouTube of those who are dealing with IBS to shed light on what IBS truly looks like, shed a little humor into some of the pain that a lot of people are going through, and connect people together so that there can be more community in this world. So I am so thankful, Christine, that you are here.
Hi. So excited. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I'm also nervous, but
yeah, I am too. So Christine and I connected through Instagram, and what's so cool is that I talk to women probably daily on Instagram, and it's, oh, hey, where'd you come from? You know, how'd you hear about me, or why are you here? And Christine's name comes up at least once a day. And so there's always this conversation of, I love Christine, I love MyIBSLife. And it's so fun to see that correlation of all those women who are sharing our community. So I'm sure they're super excited to hear you talk. So tell me a little bit about where the story began with IBS. So I know you and I have similar backgrounds in terms of young diagnoses. So tell me a little bit more about when symptoms started for you, kind of what that looked like, and that journey to getting your diagnosis.
Sure. So it has been a long 14 years of dealing with IBS. It started back in 2006. I remember I was just starting my 7th grade year of middle school. And I guess back then I just really didn't like to wash my hands. So I ended up getting strep throat like 3 or 4 times within 5 or 6 months. And I was constantly on antibiotics because of it. And Erin could explain this so much better than I could. But basically, like when you're taking antibiotics, you take them to get rid of the bad bacteria in your system so you're no longer sick. But when you're on them so much, it starts to wash out the good bacteria in your gut as well. And that's what happened in my case. And I just haven't really been the same since. And I remember the initial symptoms were having diarrhea all the time, and then it would switch to really bad constipation. It would just keep flip-flopping. I was bloated all the time, and another thing was I was always gassy in terms of like I would burp like every 5 seconds, and my mom was like, this isn't normal. I don't know what's going on, but we need to do something. And then I started like missing school like crazy too. It started, missing 1 day a week, and then it was 2 times a week, 3 times a week. And then it was just trying to get me in once a week to go to school. And so I started, just seeing my pediatrician all the time. And he did what he could. He ran blood tests just to see if there was anything abnormal. We thought I had mono or something, because I started to lose a lot of weight. I was pretty much skin and bones after a month or 2 of the initial symptoms. And then that's when I started seeing a gastro. And yeah, that's kind of how it all started. Yeah, it's just been crazy ever since.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. I've shared my story quite often, and it was similar in the sense of it started so young that there was this crazy, like, I don't even know how to describe it, but we were looking for things that weren't even GI because there was weight loss and I wasn't growing. And being a kid, I think, and I try to remember, and I don't know if you try to do this sometimes too, like I try to go back to, okay, what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was I experiencing? And I don't know if it was trauma that just like cut off those memories, but I can't remember. I'm like, did I even understand, that things were really wrong?
Right.
Or what was I thinking? Do you feel like you feel that way too, or?
Absolutely. I feel like a lot on MyIBSLife, I get DMs and stuff, especially from like younger girls who are still in middle school or high school or even college. And, they're like, how did you get through this? Like, I don't know what to do. I feel so isolated. And exactly like you just said, I feel like I blacked it out. Like,
Mhm.
I don't, I know that my middle school and high school years were horrible because of this. And I was so sad and so anxious all the time. But I don't really remember how bad it truly was. Um, but yeah, it was definitely super, especially when I first had it. No one had IBS around me. And not that we still need to raise awareness and everything now, but at least these days we see commercials on TV for medications with IBS and Crohn's and all this stuff. There is way more, gluten-free options. People are talking about being gluten-free. Back then, it was not talked about.
Mhm.
And I remember I literally felt like an alien. I just felt like it was such an awkward time too when you're that young. You're going through puberty and like it's like everything's awkward, and then to slap like IBS on top of it, it was just like it was so awful, and I just felt so alone. I was so anxious. I was so depressed, and yeah, it was just like it was terrible, honestly.
Yeah, no, I get it. The worst of mine was in fourth grade. That's whenever I finally get my diagnosis, which trialed back to they said Giardia in kindergarten, and I'm like, I still to this day, I'm like, I don't understand. 4 years? Did we really go 4 years
Oh my
without
goodness.
understanding what was happening? But I do remember a lot more of middle school and going into puberty, and I dealt with more constipation predominant. But the bloating and feeling just so uncomfortable in my body. And I think what I struggled with and what I still struggle with, like whenever I'm going back to memories and even things I struggle with today, it's like the body image issues of being that age paired with then these symptoms that make you feel so disconnected to who you are. And like, it's like, well, my stomach hurts. Well, is it, well, I'm also like changing, it's like all of these weird symptoms. And then you get your period. And then it's like, well, these are new symptoms and what's normal, what's not. And in my school and like in my community, we were really close, but we never talked about it. Like we didn't talk about even really having our period. It was more of like who has it and who doesn't.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the body image issues that we dealt with. And I don't actually know if they're talking about that today. I think there's more humor around it, of course. But I don't honestly know if it's being talked about. So it is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too to talk about the body image part of it, because I remember back then I was a competitive dancer too. And I remember I started shedding off all this weight. Like you could tell I was sick.
Mhm.
It wasn't healthy. And I remember though my dance teachers like commending me for looking like a dancer and looking so thin and looking great on stage and stuff. And it was just like, so it was like a conflicting feeling of, um, being so sick and so miserable but they're like happy that I look this way and oh my God, like they want to put me in more numbers now. And so it was like, I feel like I still deal with that today from back then. Yeah, you're totally right with the body issue stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that brings up the kind of silent illness or invisible illness world. And IBS is the weird one that's in there, but also not in there and kind of it's with being a disorder and something that we talk about. I think we've talked about it before. Our communities talk about it where it's like there's no diagnosis, there's no actual understanding. And the more we learn, the more confusing it seems to become. And so they're kind of looped into this invisible illness category while also not. So it's almost like an isolated category of invisible illness. But that's something that we hear a lot from those communities of, well, I feel like I don't look. So it's like you're seeing one thing, and then my feeling, like what I'm actually going through, is very different. And so
Yes.
then there's this disconnect of either I complain about how I feel, and then you disregard it because it doesn't match how I look, or maybe I don't feel this way, or like maybe I'm, mentally, like maybe something is off because you're saying this. So maybe I'm supposed to be feeling that way instead. And I know that's something you've talked about through humor and through real, raw honesty. So I'd love for you to expand on that because I know after high school, what happened after high school?
Sure. So after high school, it's funny too, because I feel like my IBS has just been a roller coaster. I feel like from when I was diagnosed in seventh grade through my junior year of high school, it was really bad. And I was falling behind in school and everything. And then my senior year of high school, I in general was just happier. Like I had a boyfriend I was obsessed with, and I finally felt like I had found friends I really loved and everything. And it seemed like my IBS didn't go away, but it was much more manageable. And I was showing up to school, I was, showing up to dance, I was doing all these things. Then for college, I moved from New Jersey to Illinois to attend the University of Illinois. And I remember my parents didn't even want me to go because they were like, you're not going to be able to do this, because I was always so sick, which was great. Thanks, mom and dad. And so, but I went, and I remember my first 2 years were fantastic. Like, I don't even remember having flares during those 2 years. Like, of course, I still dealt with, bloating and not being able to eat certain things. And if I was stressed, I wouldn't feel good. But it wasn't until my junior year of college, it was like a relapse. I felt like how I did my seventh grade year. I was so sick. I was starting to lose weight again. I was incredibly fearful of food. I stopped eating, which wasn't great because I was still drinking, because I was still at school and wanting to have fun, which wasn't helping anything. And I was constantly going to the ER at this point. I was having new symptoms. I was having like blood in my stool, and it was really scary. And I remember, like, I even went to the ER, and the nurse told me it was probably cancer. And I was like, I didn't have cancer, I had IBS. But it was awful. I remember I wanted to like drop out of school that year. And thankfully I got another colonoscopy and an endoscopy, got everything checked out, everything was fine, and I kind of just pushed through. But even then, like, it was hard because I was still trying to keep up with my schoolwork, and thankfully I was. And I even made, like, I remember I made honor roll that semester, the dean's list, whatever they call it in college. And like, I remember one of my friends being like, oh, I guess you're not that sick if you're like keeping up with your schoolwork. And I was like, girl, I'm like killing myself. Like, but yeah, I felt like, and then my senior year, it got better again. So it just like has really come in waves throughout the years and everything.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually going to ask you that about during that point in your life. So you're kind of an adult at college. I don't, now that I'm actually older than college, it's like, okay, I wasn't an adult, but it's that first experience of, okay, I feel a certain way. I act like I have control over my relationships. Like I can communicate what I'm thinking a little bit better. Were you able to talk to your friends during that time about what was going on, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I feel like in college, for some reason, it was just easier to be more open about it. I don't, there's like this like inexplicable like thing of like when you're in high school, it feels so gossipy and like everyone knows everything. And then when I felt like I went to college, and not only did I kind of just start over anyway because I got the heck out of my hometown and everything, but like you said, like I feel like I just felt more free there, and I truly was like picky with who I started hanging out with, because I wasn't stuck with the same people every day. I could meet whoever I wanted and hang out with whoever I wanted. So I found people that I felt like I could be open and honest about it, and like they cared, they wanted me to feel well, but they weren't like judging me for my
Yeah.
illness. So I definitely think it got easier then.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's something that is, it's a gift that shouldn't have to be a gift. You know, it's a that kind of cluster F in the brain of like, you shouldn't have to have, you know, those types of thoughts when you're developing friendships with people, where it's like, oh, are they going to like respect my illness? Are they going to actually listen and not judge me? Are they going to make a joke at my expense that I'm not prepared to be part of? You know,
Right.
shouldn't have to deal with that. It's also a great way to gauge friendships, because whenever you find those relationships are so valuable. So it's awesome that you were able to find that during a tough part of life when it comes to your IBS, especially being away from home. And I hear a lot women who, leave home in the same story of like, things are great. And then all of a sudden they just aren't, whether that be the stress of college or an illness or alcohol poisoning that then turns into, a flare for a while, and all those different things that can happen. And then they're so alone and completely isolated. And that can be really tough. And so when did you actually start your community? So that was one of your hardest moments, was through college. I know that I don't know your exact age, but I know that you're out of college and you've been out of
Yeah.
college for a while. So where did MyIBSLife come into the picture, and what really sparked you to do that?
Sure. So I graduated college in 2016, and then before I made MyIBSLife, I had actually in 2017 started a YouTube channel. It wasn't centered around IBS. I just I've been obsessed with YouTube for a long time. YouTubers I watch, and I was like just interested in it, and I was like, let me just start a channel. It was so dumb. Like, I regret everything I ever put up there. But one of my first videos I ever did, though, was called like How IBS Ruins My Life. And I remember I filmed it and I edited it, and I debated on posting it because I thought it was incredibly embarrassing and like TMI. Looking at what I post now, it's not TMI. But back then I thought it was TMI. But I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna post it. And I remember my mom watched it and she like wanted to die and thought it was awful. But then it was like my most popular video. And back then I obviously didn't have the audience I have now, but it got over like 2,000 views and I had like 10 subscribers. So like that was like awesome. And I started getting DMs from people on Instagram being like, hey, I have IBS too, like blah, blah, blah. And eventually I kind of faded out of the YouTube phase. It became like too much work for me. And there were a few reasons I started MyIBSLife. One was I was looking to actually switch like careers, and I wanted a more social media position, but I didn't really feel like I had experience. So I was like, well, let me just like start an Instagram account. I'll just create different types of content to just talk about how I did that. And even if I could get like 300 followers, like perfect. Like, and then I also started it because my boyfriend and I, Jay, we were like starting to bicker a lot, and it centered around a lot like of my illness, and me not feeling well and stuff. And he was like, you really need like a way to like cope. Like, he wasn't being mean, but he was like, I can tell you have a lot of pent up like frustration, and like I think you need like an outlet. So I started MyIBSLife in June of 2019. And I knew I just wanted it to be like a meme account because I cope with all of my issues through like sarcasm and dark humor, and yeah, that's how it started.
That's so interesting. And you have a marketing background, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what kind of brought you into the marketing world, because you are marketing. You're marketing your own story, I guess, in everyone's story. I love that it was kind of that moment of I'll share it anyways. Like, it's part of who I am. I'm just going to go ahead and share it. And then seeing people flock to it. I've seen that happen. And I still to this day, like, people who I grew up with, or, people that I have connections with in other ways, will come up to me and say, hey, I saw your account. I also have IBS. And they'll start telling you all the details of
Oh
everything.
my God. Yeah.
Which is, it's welcome. Sometimes you just have to be prepared for it. But I think it's such a testament to like, hey, there are so many people struggling with these issues that have never had the opportunity to talk about them, and to talk about them from someone who gets it, like not a doctor, even not a dietitian, like someone who lives it and someone who understands, where they can share those details that they would feel so embarrassed to share because, oh, you shared that and like you had that experience, and now I do too. And I think that's so cool. So MyIBSLife has grown tremendously. I think you're on Instagram, you're over 40,000. Are you still in the 30,000s?
35.
35,000. Okay. Getting really close. Hopefully soon to 40. That's less than 2 years, which is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got here. Like I just said, I seriously created it thinking if I could get somewhere between 300 and 500 followers ever, period. Like that. And I didn't even, I didn't even think I was going to keep up with it. It was just like something I just wanted to randomly do. And I was like, whatever, it'll die out like YouTube did and whatever. But yeah, it's like mind blowing how big it has gotten. Like it's surpassed my wildest dreams. And I never thought, if you had told me 3 years ago I would have a meme account, like I would never believe you.
And I know for a fact your following would not let you leave if you wanted to, because you're such an anchor for everybody, which is great. So let's talk a little bit about something you said on Instagram recently that I thought was very interesting. And it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, but
No.
you mentioned, I think someone had asked like, well, what would you do if you didn't have IBS, or what would you do if IBS magically went away? And it is a part of you. And you kind of had that conversation of like, well, I don't know, because it is me. Like, how would I identify without it? So I'd love to hear just kind of your thoughts as you got asked that question. And as someone who you are living, you still have IBS and you're still living through that. You're still fighting to figure out, what all is going on, which is tough. And you are, a role model, if you will, for people who are dealing with IBS. So there's a lot of pressure with that. And now getting a question like this, like, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, when I got that question the other day, I honestly, I wrote my answer 5 times, deleted it 5 times. Like it was hard because I felt like I was supposed, which I'm sure this wasn't the intention at all, but I almost felt like I needed to give an answer of like, like, no, I would be great if I didn't have my IBS. Like my life would be perfect. But like you just said, like it's like my identity. Like, and this is where I get caught up too, because I also preach that your illness like shouldn't define you. It shouldn't limit you. People shouldn't look at you and just think, oh, that's the girl with IBS or whatever. Um, but when I talk about me personally, I do truly feel like my IBS is such a huge part of who I am. I think I've also obviously kind of branded myself around it. So it's a little bit more of a unique situation than probably a regular person. Um, but yeah, I've had IBS for over half my life now, which is insane to think about. And I don't wish I never got IBS. I wish it wouldn't impact my life as bad as it does, but I think it has really shaped me as the person I am today. I think I'm a much stronger individual than I would have been, and a much more empathetic person
Mm-hmm.
than I think I would have ever been. So yeah, that question definitely took me by surprise, and I kind of had to think about it. But yeah, like this is who I am at this point, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel the same way. I totally agree with that. And I think it's a good reminder too. And it's something I say. I'm definitely more on the like, got to stay positive, shift our mindset, get positive, get positive, get positive. And one thing that I try to do is also share that like, well, I'm not always positive. Sometimes I have bad days. And I think it's important to remember that it's okay to be both. Like it's okay. And with IBS specifically, it can be so up and down. And there's so much that goes into symptoms and how you feel that's out of your control. There's some that's in your control too. And learning how to handle that of like, well, how do I own my choices and be okay with it in a healthy way? Which it's okay if it goes up and down. And then the things out of your control, it's okay if you have bad days. It's okay if things are up and down. And I know I work with women every week, every day who say that. And they're like, well, I just wish I didn't have it. I wish I didn't have to deal with it. And I think it's something that only really does kind of come in time. But only if you embrace it too. I think there is some beauty in embracing it, where if you stay isolated and stay hidden and you don't talk to people about it, like you kind of dig a hole that you almost can't get out of. And that I think leads to just a further decline where you're buried under it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's funny that you say that too, because I think it's really easy for me right now with having this community now for me to be so open about my IBS and be like, yeah, this is who I am. But if you had asked me like that question a few years ago, like I would have said, I would have been like, I don't want this. Like, why would I want this for me? Like, my
Mhm.
life is miserable because of it. And I think I've only have just, and I have a long way to go, but I think I've
Mhm.
only just started becoming more positive with dealing with this um, because of my IBS life. So I think sometimes I have to remind myself of that too, that I'm so lucky to have found all of these people that I can be my complete self in front of everything, but not everyone has that still.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Not everyone has supportive relationships already, and so being able to find those can be hard. And but I think what you shared that a lot of people should hear is that like there's nothing extraordinary about you. Why you should be leading a community. Same with there's nothing extraordinary about me. I'm not special to where it's like, oh well, only Erin can do what Erin does, or only Christine can do what Christine does. It's like you literally shared a YouTube video. It's like you just talked about it. And I mean, mine shared an Instagram post, and it's in my profession. Like I started talking about my own stuff, and I just talked about it.
Yeah,
And within just that conversation, like, there are people out there who are mean, and I feel like, I don't know what your story has been like, but the more that I've shared, I've gotten so much more positive versus negative. So even with growth, it's like, yeah, there's some negative every now and then, and it's there. And, there's some people who are mean, but for the most part, people are so kind. They're heard. They're excited to be part of what you're talking about. They're ready to talk back. Is that what you've experienced?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I felt like it's funny, like what you said before. I felt like once I started talking about it, people were coming out of the woodwork from all parts of my life. Just like it's almost like they're just like letting it all out on me now. Like I have people that were like mean to me in my college sorority now in my DMs every day, like telling me in detail about their bowel movements. And like it's insane how just like opening up about yourself, like it attracts other people to you because, and like you kind of said before, it's kind of like people feel so isolated when they have these issues and no one else around them is dealing with it, that when they find even just one random person on the internet that's sharing about it and they're hearing what they go through every day, like someone else saying it, they like latch on to you because they're like, thank God I've found you. Like I thought I was the only person dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
um and getting that from other people has helped me become more open and also accept myself and what I go through and see that I'm not a freak for going through all this. So yeah, I've definitely become a lot more comfortable and positive with my illness as well.
Yeah, yeah. And something I want everyone to hear too is like, you mentioned like you overcame the fear of sharing the post. You weren't just automatically like brave and courageous and so confident to share. Like you were insecure in what you were sharing, but you chose to do it anyway. And I think that's something like have the conversations. And that's something I try to tell people pretty often because they're like, I just don't like my husband doesn't get it or my mom doesn't get it. No one understands. It's like, well, have you tried talking about it? And time after time, it's no, well, I could never do that. I'm not confident enough to do that. It's like, you're not going to be, you just kind of have to do it and allow that to play itself out. And the more you do it, the more confident you become because you do connect to those people.
Absolutely. And I feel, and I know this is just who I kind of am in my personality, but I obviously felt that way when I was younger. Like I couldn't tell anyone about it. It's so embarrassing. And I think as I do think, I don't know, maybe I'm biased with my own story. It has gotten just easier in general for me with age. And like I felt like as I got older, I stopped caring what people think. So I think when you're younger, it will always be harder to open up about it. Not in everyone's instance, but in most. But also I feel like as I grew older, I found more of who I am, and I found that I am able to communicate more through like masking it with humor, and that alone has started so many conversations with friends, with boyfriends, with my parents, like just making, like I'll be dying on the couch and someone is like, are you good? I'll literally just, sorry for the potential curse word, but I'll just be like, no, I'm like about to shit my pants, like, and they laugh about it, but then they understand at least like what I'm going through. It just like starts through that. but it definitely is a hard conversation to bring up. So I definitely feel when like people are just like, I
Yeah.
don't even know how to tell my significant other. It's like, yeah, I feel you. It's hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. And I think it gets easier. It doesn't always get easier for each new encounter or each new person, especially when there is that fear of like, well, will they understand and like, will they accept me? And, again, 9 times out of 10, they will.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they probably also are going through the same thing. I think
Yes.
I mean, women are affected by IBS more, and women that I usually talk to are the ones that tend to have trouble sharing it. Then whenever they do, it's like their significant other, like male counterpart, tends to have IBS type issues too. Like my husband has digestive issues and it's not IBS, but it's still issues. Like he has gas and blood. He just isn't as like pulled down by it because he's just like, oh, whatever. Like I'll pass my gas and move on about my day. Whereas me, I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. Like that's embarrassing. And like, that's not what I want to, that's not the image I want to portray. And
Right.
so I do agree that like it gets so much easier. And the more that I think the sooner you can become confident in yourself and who you are, the easier that does become, because there's also that outcome of they either accept me and they're in my life or they don't and they're not. And being able to own that, I think, is important. And as a kid, oh, that's impossible. It seems impossible. I think hopefully it'll get better. And that's something that, accounts like yours, it's so important for, because it shows even young girls like, hey, things aren't perfect. Yeah. You can still be confident in who you are with this. And there are people who get it. And so if your small community right now doesn't, keep fighting to find out who you are, and you can go find those people, in the future.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, so you've said a lot for the person with IBS. I think I've taken away a lot, and I hope everyone else listening hears some of those like nuggets of like share, and like you'll be okay. It's okay to have hard days, all those different nuggets. But what would you say to someone who doesn't have IBS, what you wish that they would understand at the start?
Oh, that's hard. I guess I would, there's like a lot I would want them to understand. First is that it's all very real. And I know I just think about how I interact with like my boyfriend who's perfectly healthy every day. It's really hard for him to understand that I could possibly be in this much pain every single day.
Mhm.
And and I think we all get that a lot, that it's all in our head, that we're probably faking it. So for someone with IBS that doesn't have IBS, I would just want them to truly understand that this does affect our daily lives. It's not an excuse. It's not in my head. It's very real, and everything I go through is very real, and everything I speak is very real. Um, and I'm glad that you can't understand it, but I just wish you could be a little bit more empathetic and understanding. And then I think another thing is just to listen to
Mhm.
that person. It can be really easy for someone who doesn't have it and doesn't understand it to kind of tune out and just be like, oh, what else is new? Christine doesn't feel well, but like that makes me feel worse.
Yeah.
So I wish the person that doesn't have IBS would just kind of like listen and not always give advice on how to fix it, but just to be like, that sucks. Like,
Mhm.
I'm so sorry. That's all like that I
Yeah.
want out of someone.
Yeah, I love that. Listen, be kind, believe, like without a doubt, especially if you're in a relationship with someone, believe them. Like don't ever discount what someone's going through. Their experience is always valid and real, and mental health conditions as well. Like I think that's so important. Well, Christine, thank you so much. So I'm going to link your socials and all of that in the show notes. But is there any other way that you would like people to connect with you or anything?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I can be found pretty much anywhere on the internet right now. You can find me on Instagram at MyIBSLife, on TikTok, YouTube. I have podcasts and everything. So I'll be sure to give it all to Erin. But yeah, I hope to see you guys
Yes.
there.
So I'll put the show notes. So connect with Christine, and thank you so much. We would love to hear what you thought. And so if you enjoyed our conversation, leave a review for sure, but screenshot and then tag us both on Instagram so that we can all kind of communicate and talk together. So it's at MyIBSLife, at erinjudge.rd. And we would love to hear what you took away, if you felt encouraged or had a piece of humor or felt inspired in some way. Share it with us and we will talk to you there.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin.
Do you like what you heard? Leave us a review. Do you want to connect with others in this community? Join our Facebook group, The Gut Community, or follow us on Instagram. All links can be found in show notes. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on The Gut Show.